The time is 6:31 p.m. Calling to order this work session. Roll call, please.
Mark Porter.
Here.
Ty Ward.
Present.
Christy Kessel. Absent. Maynard Robbins.
Here.
Mark Thornton.
Here.
Deborah Williamson.
Here.
Dave Eastburn.
Here.
Okay. So we're going to go over an enrollment discussion along with a 5-year forecasting model presentation that I believe.
Evan's
Evan's
gonna start
gonna
and then
start
I'll
with?
jump in as we go, yeah.
Dave, can you see my screen all right?
Thumbs up again.
Yes.
All right. So I'm going to walk you guys through our forecast model. So kind of the first step in this forecast model, I'm over here on this Get Started tab, is I have to predict what I think the overall growth rate is going to be for this year in legislation. So what I have decided upon is last year we got 2.5%, and everything I heard last week, and even from my own colleagues, they're predicting 2%. So I mapped out 2% overall growth rate for the next 5 years to start tying all of our financials and where we're heading into an overall picture. With that, I'm going to start turning it over to Zach. We're going to talk about enrollment and our certified enrollment, because it's kind of the next step within this model.
Okay, you wanna unshare or do you wanna,
Yeah, I can do share.
and then I'll jump in on this real quick and then I'll turn it back over to you. You've got a handout as well. It just says enrollment trends, dated 11/25. And Dave, I shared this slide deck with you as well. So, I'm looking at certified enrollment the last 3 years, and there's a summary comparison chart that we have within the system that we can use, and it's really nice to look at. So I'm going to start with certified enrollment from 2022, and what you're going to look at is the previous, which would be 2021, certified enrollment. We're always going to look at actual enrollment, which is right here. This is the number that is going to generate the dollars that we would get each year, okay? And so in 2021, we had a certified enrollment of 1607.38, so just over 1,600 students. And you can see in 2022, the certified enrollment was down 39.12 kids, okay? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. All of these different things come into play to get us to that number. Now, one other thing I did want to point out, you can see in 2021, there was 171 students open enrolled out of the district, and that grew by 7.4 to 178.5, okay, in the wrong direction. Now we're looking at 2023, so again, this number here is what we should have seen on the slide before that, 1568, you can see it right there. So that's now here. And certified in 2023 was 1525.81. So again, a significant decline in enrollment, 42.45 students. And again, an increase in open enrolled out from 178.5 to 192.8. And now we're gonna go to this fall, just a few weeks ago, certified, again, 1525 the previous year to 1479.66. And again, this is a decrease of 46.15 students. Now, the one thing that I did want to show you that's really positive is we went from 192.8 to 188.8. So this is a negative open enrolled out, which is a positive thing. Does that make sense? So last year we had 192.8, now we only have 188.8. So that's a good thing, and that's starting to trend in the right direction. But really, since 2017 to 2020, it was pretty steady enrollment. There wasn't any huge increase or decrease. It was a couple students here and there, and then came 2021 where it started to really go down. So when you look at this, a couple takeaways. When we were at 1607.38 in 21 to where we're at this fall at 1479.66, it's a decrease in 127.72 kids. which equates to roughly $1.2 million of lost revenue over the last few years. Now, how I'm using that number, again, SSA 7983 for FY25, and then each one of these pieces is connected to this. So the total amount, adding these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up, multiplied by the 127.72, gives us that 1.2 million. Does that make sense? And then the other thing I highlighted, like I said, was the flip in the number of students going back down. So we'll continue to monitor what that looks like over the course of the next 6-7 months as things come in and out. So really just wanted to show you this because as we look at what Evan's going to talk through next, this is a significant number of students just in the last 3 years. Okay, Evan, I'll unshare and turn it over to you. Unless there's questions right now, just around these 4 documents that I showed you. Okay.
All right, so you're gonna see Zach's numbers here on the enrollment tab. But we also have to project out future enrollment. So what I've kind of chosen to do this year is to map everything out for the 5-year projection via the cohort method. So as kids graduate and new ones come in, it's gonna automatically feed into this model for the next 5 years. So what I learned is we've been hovering around this 55 to 60 kids in preschool. We just expanded. So I planned preschool out at 60 for the next 5 years. That's assuming full preschools and we don't expand or we don't have any other kids attend our preschool programming. I've also contacted neighboring preschools to see how many could feed into us. And based on this year's this year's kindergarten count of 76, and based on what I can see feeding into us of roughly 90 kids, I'm assuming 80 kids is gonna be our new stable kindergarten class moving forward. So what does that mean on this projection model? Next year alone, I picture us being down another 28 kids, just based off what's feeding into us. The year after that, 33 kids, 36 kids, then we have a big class graduating of 44 kids, 5 years out. So if this trend continues, just based on what we have currently, I'm projecting down enrollment for the years to come. Any questions on that?
So how many years are you projecting 80 kids then?
So I'm projecting 5 years out.
Have you, and this is probably way more into the weeds than we need to get to, but have we seen, have we taken one of the classes that's in whatever, 8th, 9th, 10th grade? Was theirs pretty consistent all the way through?
Yeah, so
Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
did their class go up and down all the years, or was it pretty consistent all the way through?
yeah, so like I mean I have it just for this year readily available, but I have it for previous years as well for this model. So last year we had 106 6th graders, and now we have 103 7th graders, so we lost 3 in 6th grade.
And the model projects 103 all the way down to the bottom right corners. You can see that.
As you can see, we had 116 9th graders last year. We have 116 10th graders this year. Remain the same. Some areas are up, some areas are down. We had 110 kindergartners last year, but we had 117 first graders this year. So change overall was 16 when you flush it PK 12. But if you go 1st through 12, we were actually up, but that big kindergarten drop. And that's why I forecast based off the preschool and kindergarten. Again, those are assumptions. If we have more, it'll affect the model. If we have less, it'll affect the model. But I figured after 76 kids, 80 was a fair number. Kind of shot the middle between 90 and 70.
And has PK typically been higher than, like a lot higher than the 54?
No, preschool's been pretty stable over the last few years. We did add a section this year, and as you can see, that bumped us about 6 kids.
Okay. But the kindergarten has been what it is.
Yep.
Okay.
Another important note here is that's also calculated into this model is our ESA students, so we do get a little bit of funding for them. So last year we had 98 kids who were eligible for ESAs. This year we have 123 kids, so that's 25 more kids who became eligible. The question I get is, were those kids that left our school district? I don't necessarily think so. I think how the formula was mapped out for ESA eligibility, I think more kids just qualified this year as it was a tiered approach on the poverty line. Any questions on how that kind of ties into the model? So the next kind of slide that I'll walk you through or tab is special ed. So as you can see, these are our weighted students. So remember, all these students come with more dollars than the average 1.0 FTE. So 1.72, 2 and some change, and 3 and some change. So last year we had 197 special education kids. This year we have 210 special education kids. How does that relate? If you guys look back to key measures or the quarterly report that I presented a couple times, you'll see that there's a couple areas that we're spending a little bit more money in support services. But we also had more special education kids than what we were forecasting, so we had to add a couple additional para associates to support those kiddos. So I find that out at 210 kids moving forward. We're gonna see a change down here of this year of 550,000 to support some of our high cost claims. And then I did a 3% inflator on out for the next 5 years to get our overall special education deficit. This is important to remember as we're doing our tax levies on our SBRC. Cash reserve SBRC should be covering our deficit every year to make sure we're maintaining cash in the bank. Does that make sense? And down here you can just see our historic deficit. As you can see, we fluctuate pretty greatly throughout the years. Any questions on special ed?
What's the? So you have 550 this year?
Our deficit was like 387, I think.
Yep, so 387,000, 381 is what I certified last year. I'm expecting $550,000 in increased high cost claims, which will bring my deficit up to 937,000. And then I think that's gonna stable out with 3% increases based off our budget and how we forecast over the next 5 years.
And this is something we will do every single September, October.
The next tab on this model is our dropout prevention. I have us pending board approval, so this comes before you guys in December, so the next board meeting. I'm gonna recommend approving 100% of all of our at-risk dropout money that we rate, so I have that maximized out for the upcoming years. Again, that buys us authority and is paid for by property taxes. So I do not have to do the maximum, but we have historically always done the maximum. And as you can see, this is the projected dollars it will generate for our at-risk dropout prevention programming. Supplemental weighting, also referred to as operational sharing. Currently, we are sharing a social worker with AEA, generating 2 more FTEs worth of funding. You can go up to a maximum of 21, but these are some areas that we are currently eligible to share with neighboring schools.
And this is a way that some districts really look to prioritize in regards to generating extra dollars. So if that's something the board wants to explore more or really wants to dive into, I'm happy to do that. It's not something that I love to do, just being a part of it in other districts, but it doesn't mean it's not the right thing to do either, so.
I think it's important to mention, the sunset of operational sharing is 3 years out. So it'll be up for legislative vote again here in about 3 years. So we just want to keep that up. I don't know where they're gonna go with it. I haven't heard anything, but just keep that at the forefront of your mind. At 3 years, this could look different. The next tab is instructional support levy. What I really want to highlight on this tab is this big red banner. Our current instructional support levy expires at the end of FY 2027. That means July of this year, we had to bring a proposal before the board to redo another 5-year resolution, or we lose about $1 million of funding for the district. What is also important to highlight for you board members who are advocating for the state is this model also reflects the state shortfall. So when instructional support levy came out, the state said they were going to fund a portion of this levy, and they've yet to fund it, an amount to us of $200,000 per year. So that's $200,000 per year our property taxpayers are picking up to cover our instructional support levy. It's written into law, but the state doesn't have to fund it, but they said they were going to fund it.
And it's been like that since day one.
It's been like that since day one, but I just want to make you guys aware that there's $200,000 out there that the state originally agreed to cover. So yes, this levy generates about $1 million for instructional support that can be used for any general fund eligible expense. And we currently have a 1% surtax on that to buy down our property tax burden. So we do have a 1% income surtax on that. As I said, FY 2027 that expires this July. I'm assuming we'll probably take that before the board, and I'm hoping it passes. I plan on proposing it with a 0% income surtax because they're also phasing that out in legislation. So that's why it's 0% years moving forward. You guys can also say we could do it with an income surtax till it's phased out, but if things are coming well, we just have it set up how it should be. Any question on the instructional support levy?
The law where that is able to be spent on anything in the general funds, that's pretty new too, right? It used to have to be earmarked.
At the beginning, you said to be earmarked, and then they've loosened the restraints over the years.
Yeah, kind of like TLS.
Yeah.
Another interesting thing on this tab to kind of just highlight, or for you guys to kind of be aware of, is a forecast growth rate by year. So district income tax paid forecast, as you can see, that's decreasing, and this ties to the new flat tax laws that are coming out. So the amount of property valuation or amount of income tax tied to our values is slowly decreasing as we reach that flat tax. That should be there by FY 2029, because FY 2030 you can start seeing the growth will start going back out, so we'll hit that bottom level that went through legislation, and then we should start climbing back up based on the growth. The next tab, so you guys should see this again in the December board meeting, is our MSA, modified supplemental amount. So this ties to more things we can go before the SBRC for. So this year we were eligible for $271,000 of additional authority, not cash authority, for our open enrolled out, not on prior year's count. So that means we receive kids, or kids left our district after the count date, so receiving authority back for that. We'll also see additional authority in $28,330 for limited English proficient beyond 5 years. So at the conclusion of last year, there was several of our kiddos who did not reach English proficiency within the 5-year window. So they gave us additional authority to help us get those kids to that mile marker. As you see, last year was $333,000. This year is $300,000. So we lost out or missed out on $33,000 of authority. So here's a big one. It's miscellaneous income. So what's miscellaneous income? This is our title money, and this was our ESSER money. As you see in FY 2025, ESSER money has been exhausted. So I had to back out $1.3 million worth of miscellaneous income that we were used to receiving to flatten us back out with a 2% growth rate, just like our SSA, moving forward to get used to our new miscellaneous income amount. So that's pretty much just made up of title, grants, that kind of thing. Any big questions so far before we get into? Alright. So this is kind of what I always show. I just want to walk you guys through the tabs, but this is kind of what, when you see snippets in my PowerPoints, this is the screen I'm taking. So this really has our financial metrics put into all these avenues into one clear picture that we can manipulate real time. So some things that I put in here, here's our 3%. We've talked about that. That's what we budgeted around. I put that 3% all the way out. So average
3%
growth in expenses. every
based
year.
on salaries that we currently have.
Correct.
Okay.
So that's what we're budgeting for, 3% growth. FY 2025, enter dollar change for ongoing expenses. So, we came before the board last year and we proposed a $1.1 million reduction. You guys made the decision. That took place a little bit before teacher minimums came out and we had to add additional para support this year. So that $1.1 million reduction turned into a $906,202 reduction is what it ended up equating to after we took care of some of the needs we had to do this year. What's this $2.4 million reduction? That was that one-time audit adjustment or downward adjustment backed out. So I'm not accounting for that for expenditures anymore moving forward. Any questions on how those were taken into account? So here's what we're really looking at. As you guys can remember from some of our board learning over the last week, percentage of authority being spent, we're gonna be 0.7 over at this time. Next year, we're gonna be 102% of our authority spent, 106, 108, 112, 115. Those are one metrics that we just learned about. Financial metrics, UAB, 15%. Going into next year, we're looking at being at 11.9. Then we're going 8.8, 2.6, negative 6.4, negative 18.4, negative 33.9.
Assuming we do nothing.
Assuming we do nothing. Solvency ratio, we ended this year at 0.4. Cash is expected to go up to 10.8. Board metrics is minimum 8%. Ideally, we'd be at 15%. 9.1, 5.6, so forth onwards. Okay, those are percentages. What does that look like in the form of dollars? Change in UAV this year, negative 173,000. If you put that 173 on that 906, that was our 1.1. That's the difference that kind of came out this year. Change in fund balance, 238,000. Move forward to next year, if we do nothing, we're gonna have a UAB change of negative 688,000 and a change in fund balance 310. So the big change in our fund balance was that downward adjustment that really impacted our fund balance, which impacted our solvency ratio moving forward. Again, if we were to make no changes, you can see how this compounds out from there. So we'll get back to the expense tab and we can have a discussion around that here in just a second, but I just wanted to map that out for you guys. So I'm also tracking our UAB. And one of the things I want to put into perspective, and this is where it gets really, really difficult. So you remember how in my financial health report I separate regular program and categorical? So if you put that into perspective, 27% of that UAB you see on this forecast model is actually locked up into categorical funding at this time. That means it is obligated funds for certain expenses. Ours are homeschool, textbook aid for a non-public, statewide voluntary preschool, TAG, EOL, and the board flex fund. So I mean, the flexibility fund is flexible, but it is considered a categorical expense because it is tied to board action and what you guys want to obligate that for. This is all one-time money as well. If I spend this all down this year and it goes to zero, it's just gone. Now we're just budgeting off the new allotment from year to year. So what does that mean? That means about 3.6% of that UAB you're seeing on this previous page is inflated with categorical funds that we can't use on anything but those categorical pots of money.
Even though that says general fund expenditures.
Correct. So categoricals run through the general fund,
Okay.
just earmarked for certain budgets.
It's the silos inside the silos.
Oh boy.
Some interesting things that I get asked on a regular kind of basis are our property values. We do 2.5% change evaluations. If you want a better assessment, I'd probably say talk to our assessor a little bit. As we can see historically, here have been our changes by percentage. So right now we're $952 million in property value. And with 2.6% or 2.5% growth, this is where we expect our property valuation to be. So FY 2027, our property values in Fairfield alone or within our district should be around $1 billion. Tax rates. Remember, cash reserve, SBRC. I'm literally matching what I expect our deficit to be on this amount. Make sure I'm taxing the cash to cover our special education deficit to wash that out. And the cash reserve, if you guys remember the school finance formula, 88.4% comes from the uniform levy and the state aid. There's an additional 12.5% that comes through additional levies. Well, this is kind of how that ties to us in real numbers. Put in our $1.34 PEPAL. And moving forward, we flattened out management fund to match kind of what our expenses are expected to be while buying it down slightly. What does this do? If you look up top on the property tax rate, it stabilizes our property tax rate, assuming we don't do anything different for the next 5 years, around the $12.65 mark. Fluctuates a little bit, but that's about as close as I can get on a forecasting model to get to the penny.
Are the state rollbacks pretty steady? Is it gonna stay around 47% now for residential?
I don't think it's going to change a whole lot. I think last year was the big adjustment because they had to play catch up, and I think it's mapped out to be pretty steady. It'll change slightly every year, but I think it's mapped out to be pretty steady. Matt Gillespie should be able to get me some of those numbers here in the near future. I think January is what he was telling me. Just because people asked, we also have a little management fund tab. Here's what our ending fund balances are looking like for the next 5 years. So we are spending it down slowly but surely. And I think a really good work session we have in the future is, what do you guys want me to keep this reserve at? I'm comfortable with what this model's showing at this current moment, but I'd be happy to set a reserve balance with you guys at some point.
Does that forecast any more early retirements?
Just not.
No.
So you guys are probably asking, what's next? What do we need to do? Do we want to discuss that tonight, or do you guys just want to let this soak in? I did run like 3 different scenarios. I'd be happy just to leave it at that as well. What would you guys like to do?
I think we should discuss a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's my opinion.
All right, so scenario 1, what I just put is change in UAB 688,180. So watch your indicators, and I'm just gonna put in a random line, probably other, and I just back out minus $688,180 worth of expenses. 1% wrong column. That's what the indicators look like going forward. Again, I think we're still good in the cash aspect, but our UAB aspect is not at the board metrics of 15%. Go to 8.6, so we got probably a little bit of wiggle, but not a ton. 2.7, and then we're right back into conversations again.
That's if we found a way to reduce $688,000 for FY '26.
Correct.
So, Evan,
Yeah.
this is Dave. Is there a way that you can show us what a 15% UAB would look like as far as expense adjustments?
Yep, I have that on my list of 3 scenarios.
Okay.
So scenario number 2. Actually, I'll go to what Dave asked. So scenario number 2, $1,375,000 would get us 14.8% UAB and 15% solvency. That's about as perfect as you can get. Your authority and your cash match.
What is that, 1.3?
1.375.
And that'd need to be done in 1 year next year.
If you want to get to perfect that quickly, that's what it looks like. What if we split the middle at 950,000? That's what it looks like. I just picked 3 random scenarios. I made sure I want to show you guys what it would take to get to the full 15-15 to be perfect with our board metrics. I want to show you if we just balance to what we're going to be over. And then I just picked a random one in the middle. And there was no logic behind my 950,000 besides I just...
What if you put 500 in FY '26, 500 in FY '27, 500 in FY '28? And this is assuming that we're going to stay steady at 80
Correct.
new students coming in
Correct.
to kindergarten. Not assuming anybody or that trend in open enrollment continues to go the right direction like it is. That's not calculated in this either.
Correct.
Right, and with 80 kids, we'd probably be dropping down to 4 sections. So we'll be
Correct.
talking about, absorbing one of those grades anyway.
What else do you guys want to see?
I'd like to hear District Eastburn's opinion. Dave?
Well, I'm not sure that I have an opinion right now, Mark. I wanted to see the worst case scenario on a immediate 15% UAB. I think that's the worst case. I don't think, I really don't have an opinion right now. I'm still absorbing it. I do think that the UAB and the solvency ratio is not going in the right direction, and we need to arrest that and get it to our policy limit as soon as we possibly can. Assuming that that's feasible on the expense side, if that makes sense. So Evan, is there a way to punch in here? I don't want to revisit old battles, but if we hadn't taken the write down, what would it look like? Is there a way to do that?
Yeah, give me 1 second here. I'm gonna have to stop sharing.
While Evan's doing that, other things that you kind of have at your seat right now, just more for you to have and do what you'd like with. This is a expenditure account format, so I've had a couple board members ask about specific numbers and what they correlate with when you're looking at the board bills. So this gives you a rundown of what those would equate to if you're looking at a cost. There's quite a few in here, so it's just a nice thing to have. Like if you have a question, like what does that go with? You can look to that as a reference. This one was just something Megan and I and Evan got at our board president workshop on Friday morning this past week. Just some nice things to think about, and some other little simplified charts connected to parliamentary procedures, spending authority, a lot of things you already know, but just a fun little handout that we can have at the board table. And then this is the final audit, just so you have a full draft of that, which we already shared.
operationally, Zach, with the budget cuts that we did last year, I mean, how is that going thus far? I mean, and if we go down that route again, do you see avenues?
Yeah, I'd say it's going, I mean, as good as it can be. I think the majority of the hit, so to speak, has been at this central office kind of level. So I would say most people have felt that, and it has impacted a little bit at the building levels with different things from a support standpoint. We're continuing to tweak things and make some changes as we figure out something is or isn't working very well. But I think the prioritization process had already been, done last year. I don't know or think that we would need to do that again if the board's directive is, hey, let's take another chunk at this this year. Evan and I have been talking about, and we're meeting with multiple companies to look at what we can do insurance-wise through health plans. So that'll be something that I think could save some significant dollars that would not be cutting FTE. But yeah, we still have some hard decisions to make. But no, it's never easy. Yeah.
Well, last year when we did that, we knew we did the hardest hits here in this building, but I guess we believed that you could handle it before we met you, so.
So Dave, this was last year's model out of the gate before changing factors. $1.1 million reduction, $237,000 health insurance change, 15.5 building the right side up on cash.
Yep, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you, Evan.
Yep.
So I've got a chart here, speaking of FTEs, of pupils per teacher and pupils per certified staff. But it ends in 2023. And I know previous to 2023, we've been, over that. And then looks like 2023, we're kind of right at the state median for both of those. Do you know what we were at 2024 for those numbers? And if you don't have an answer right now, you can just
Pupil per teacher.
yeah.
Is it on the performance profile?
Could be.
Want to look?
It was on the IASB site, which is where I found it. But I'm just frustrated with it ending in 2023 and not having this year's numbers.
Not per pupil expenditures. You're saying per pupil.
Yeah, FTE per pupil.
Okay.
And then they broke that down between certified staff and regular education teachers. I think they also have admin per admin.
And is there a state average?
Yeah. There's a state median, which in 2023 looks like on both of those we hit the state median. We were a little heavy before that.
So I have a question for Zach and Evan. Is it even feasible to do $1,375,000 in budget cuts, or even $950,000 in this next year,
Definitely.
and still maintain our educational programs and everything?
No, we wouldn't be able to maintain. It would be significant cuts to programs, also people. From
So
from an operating standpoint, I don't see how we would be able to do that. We'll be able to take a good chunk out of it with our insurance movements, but we would be looking at cutting specific programming with teachers attached to that as oversight. So.
And there's that
And
opportunity.
there's probably no way to arrest the enrollment decline by cutting those programs either.
It's not going to be something that's viewed as positive for. Correct.
So the only real feasible amount is the 688,000. Is that correct?
I would say that'd be on the low end, probably.
Okay. So we're looking somewhere around $688,000 in budget cuts in FY '25. Is that the feasible amount we're looking at?
I think if we're speaking strictly from a financial standpoint, it needs to be closer to 900, 950.
Okay. And that's feasible.
Well, I mean,
Feasible from a number standpoint, yes. Feasible from how is this going to impact people? That's going to be really hard. I'm not
Yep.
sure if that makes any sense, but
It does. It makes a lot of sense.
and so I guess
Okay.
unless there's other discussion, I think we can kind of jump into the next piece of this because in my mind this all plays into it. So
Did you have something, Deborah?
I don't
Sorry.
want to lose the,
Yep.
I can't remember what slide, but it was the opportunity to do, I think it's called operational sharing, which if we explore that, we may find some advantage that's.
yeah, so if you look at this, let's just take
How does Maxis Alloc start?
and so what that number means in parentheses is so superintendent, if you share me with another district, you get 9 additional students connected to that. So the $7,900 times 9, we would get that for sharing.
Makes sense.
So that's what all of those numbers mean.
Okay.
So if we were maxed out,
At 21,
it'd still be 536,503.
so that was about 400 grand is what that would generate if we were sharing as much as we possibly could.
And we,
Right, Evan?
we couldn't, I saw a couple
no,
that,
hang on, I was wrong.
It's only,
It's not that much.
we were at 688 minus 536,
Okay.
so 150,000.
oh, good grief.
Not worth it.
Not worth it, no. Not unless something just falls in
I'm
there.
gonna check
lap.
that before I'm going.
I know this is way out of our scope of even just hoping for the future, but like, what does it look like? Or maybe that already proved it by doing that, because that's showing you're gonna get that much more money per kid, right?
Yeah.
So if one of our classes goes from 80 to 90 for some odd reason,
That would
that's
be
pretty much a guess right there, because you're getting that. Okay.
Yeah.
Never mind. That answered my question. Though.
well, you can type in those numbers to see what that would do.
And again, I know it's out of our control. I'm just curious what that looks like going forward.
Yeah, so if we went to 90 going forward, still next year, because this year's certified count affects next year, it's still 688. And then just tick this up by about 0.1.
Okay.
And we can adjust things like SSA as well. What if it's 2.5 across the board? Gives us about 0.5.
Without doing anything.
Which just bumps our UAV by 0.5%.
Right.
But that would take that number down to 664,000.
And if it goes to 0 in a couple of years?
Two years out, 0. We get into $2 million problems really quick.
Yep.
So do we still not know how the changes with the AEA are gonna play into this?
This doesn't have anything AEA wise built in.
So that will potentially change something.
What it could change would be the dollar amount that we would essentially keep per student, as opposed to just go to the AEA.
So it is factored in from the standpoint is every year I record all my expenses, all that money going to the AEA. So it's 700,000 that we contribute to the AEA is all it is an expense. So next year if we were to get that money back in, we could.
But that 700 includes the special ed that has to go still by law.
Correct.
Right.
So we could keep some of it, but it's already kind of factored in here. It's just how we use the money going forward.
And that money, supposedly is going towards services that we'd have to replace.
Or we keep in-house. Yes.
Yeah.
But yeah,
We'd have to replace it with in-house.
The media and educational funding currently is about 211,000 or
We sent 138,000 to the AEA this year for the resolution is what we approved.
which bucket is that? Is that media or
I thought that was all of it, but
That's
that was
all of
before
it? I don't know. I'll
What we
have to
did, that was just like, what we didn't have to send, but we chose to send.
look. Okay.
I'm not sure exactly if that was just those two buckets.
Maybe
I'd
I
have
was
to
looking
look.
at a prior year on IASB, but
But my understanding was that was for 1 year, and then that percentage that we have flexibility with goes up, right?
we just have 100%, I think, ability to either
Correct.
keep it or
Correct.
pay for services.
Outside of the special ed.
Right.
Yep.
Any other questions on?
But the exact dollar amount of what that would be, we can find that out for sure.
So I know last year we had about 770,000 in AEA. This year we have 698,000 in AEA related expenses. It's kind of tied to enrollment as well.
So our pupil to teacher ratio is average, right?
It was last year.
What's considered high, but doable? I mean, how large can we grow our classes?
I don't know
And
enough
reduce
about it
FTEs.
from like a financial standpoint.
How about from a space standpoint? A lot of those classrooms aren't that big.
Yeah. And we have a board
Yes.
district, don't we?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think there is.
For, is it pre-K 5 or K5?
K.
Do you know, off the top of your head?
At the younger levels, it's,
Is it less
class
than 25
size
or
is less
23?
than 20, and then for the upper ones, it's class size is less than 25 or something.
Okay.
I can't remember where the cutoffs are. But we do have a policy around.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Other,
Can we take a look at the enrollment by grades?
Yeah. So just remember, this is total kids.
Mm-hmm.
And the certified budget comes with total kids with weightings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's not a lot of opportunity.
no, and if you look, I mean, really, we're kind of stabilizing what enrollment looks like each year, so
I mean, I can see one.
minus
high
the
number.
incoming.
Looks like the 7th grade in year 26 is one of the larger numbers, but everything else hovers close. Oh, and there's another one, 124, hovers close to 100.
Yeah, but we're keeping what we know here. So we're keeping what we know. So like right now, we know we've got this, right? And we're just keeping that same number all the way through, which
Is an assumption.
correct.
Ties to our board goal of 100% belonging.
Well, I don't see an opportunity. I was hoping to, but
And if we did pass a bond, there would be some savings in maintenance and utilities. But at this point, we would be talking about probably at the end of this graph, right? Because the building wouldn't be open until 2029.
Now,
No, yeah.
yeah, good point.
so I don't know if we want to jump into that discussion.
Just before we leave, Evan, could you go back and plug in the 688 again and show me what the UAB was?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I apologize.
How do we arrive at the 688 again?
Isn't that the deficit from the year before?
So that puts me at 0 change in UAB next year. That's 100% money for authority in, 100% out.
And 12. Okay, thank you very much.
From the forecasting standpoint, what do you guys want to see next? Zach and I will need guidance from you all on how you want us to start approaching budget solutions.
Personally, I need time to absorb and think about it before
Sounds good.
answering that question.
Well, I know last year too, we had that range that Siegel gave us. Are we saying our range is kind of between 700 and 1.35?
That's kind of what I was mapping out in the scenarios.
And when we did our 1.1, I believe the high end of our range last year was 1.8,
Is it that high?
Yeah.
somewhere around there. So we kind of picked the middle last time. Somewhere around there.
It's fine.
Yeah.
Under it.
Anybody else?
I think we need some people to have some kids.
All right, so jumping in.
So just one
Yeah.
question. So as we move to committees, is this something that one of the committees would consider further in the next month? Or is this some, I mean, just wondering if there's extra work that,
Yeah, this would be part of the finance committee and the strategic planning committee.
okay. So
Would
both.
have some discussions around this monthly to report back to the board on
Okay. So we can keep talking.
for not too long, because we're gonna get into a decision in the next couple months here at the latest, I think, right?
First hearings in February.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think from a finance committee point of view, what's obvious is that we need to come up with the expense adjustment figure and the UAB and the solvency ratio that we can recommend to the board to start working for next year's budget. That's how I see it. Is that correct, Evan?
That's how I've done it in the past.
Yes. So that's what we need to take this information and then come up with the expense adjustments based upon these assumptions. And the board probably needs to, at some point, I would like to see a resolution that we approve the assumptions. And then based on these assumptions, work on what is the expense adjustments that need to be made, and what does the UAB and the solvency ratio look not only in the next year but in the out years, and make that recommendation to the board, and then we start working on the budget and making those expense adjustments.
And solvency is the one that has to stay above 0 or else we get in front of the state, right?
No.
UAB.
UAB,
UAB.
credit card.
The solvency ratio is important in a bonding situation. As I understand it, the UAB is important at the state level.
Auditors and bonding agencies like solvency and cash. The state likes UAB.
Because that shows us our budget authority.
So if we spend 100% of our UAB, what is the reduction we need? Was that the 688?
680,100.
So that's, to me, that's the next step in our finance committee, and we need to, it needs to be done in this next month so that we can get this to the board and then we can start to work so that we can keep the budget cycle in place.
Okay. makes sense. Should we move on to,
I think so.
I lost my agenda here. I'm just discussing the bond,
Next steps, yeah.
next steps with the bond.
So ultimately, now that we know that it didn't pass, we kind of thought it would be good just to bring up some ideas or thoughts around what we want to do next, connected to a plan for our facilities. And I see 3 options that I wanted to share with you. None of them are in any great depth, but just things that I think we need to make sure at this table we're really we do our due diligence, I guess. So obviously option number 1 is to go back to our constituents in November of 25 and ask for another vote connected to the same or pretty much the same project. You know, I really, again, commend the hard work that you all put in over the last 4 or 5 months to get where we got on November 4th. It just wasn't close enough. So that's option 1. We do a very similar project, kind of approach it the same way. Obviously, we tweak some things. All right, so that's one option. Second one, what we had communicated with everyone that came to our forums and what we shared in our literature was that if this doesn't pass, we're going to start spending money renovating and fixing the current middle school as it sits. And again, that would be, all right, let's list out the priorities and timelines over the next 4 or 5 years to start spending that $21+ million in SAVE. Option 3, and this is where it would really be kind of blowing things up, would be to look at a completely different type of configuration within the district. And I think when we look at our current enrollment trends and where we're heading, in my mind, this is something I think that we would probably value, there'd be value in looking into this a little bit more in depth. So looking at potentially, shutting down another school, whether that's Washington or Pence. I really think it'd probably be Washington, and then reconfiguring grade structures. So could we have a pre-K 5 building, a 6-7 building, an 8-9 building? We would still get rid of the middle school, destroy that, sell Washington. This would significantly reduce costs in FTE too, because we're going to lose administrators, we're going to lose support staff, secretaries, all of those types of positions that equate to running another building. And then obviously the ACT building, we would want that to be something we get rid of as well. And then move into one new facility. And again, what those grade bands are like, that's not something that I've really thought too much about, but it would really be going to 3 attendance centers starting in the fall of 2029. And I think in my mind, that's what makes the most sense just fiscally and where we're going with enrollment. But you guys have been here much longer and have a better sense too of just the community as a whole. So yeah.
So can you repeat again the grades? So Washington, ACT gone.
Middle school gone, current middle school gone, so those 3. And then we would reconfigure in the 3 buildings, whether it's a pre-K 6 and a 7-8 and then 9-12, or a pre-K 5 and a 6-7 and an 8-12. That would all be things I think we'd really want to get a lot more input from people on. Another thing I talked with, I think, Megan about at some point was just, do we want to provide some opportunities over the next few months for our stakeholders to give feedback on the current project that we had? What are there still questions about? What else do we need to clarify if that's the route we end up going to? So those are my thoughts, but
Vote again, we don't need any new numbers, we know what those are. Fixing the middle school, prioritizing that, we have an idea of what the costs might be, and prioritizing that is not as difficult as it sounds. Option 3, I think, would be not as, well, we'd still have to fix the middle school to some degree to and possibly renovate Pence and maybe the high school.
I would say for sure there'd be some things we would need to do at Pence, absolutely. Not sure about the high school. But yeah, there definitely would be
Okay.
additional costs associated with what we need to do at Pence.
So then probably what we need to know is, what would we need to do to Pence minimally? What would that cost? How long would it take? And what would be the savings? All the savings with those actions, reduced administrative.
From a
reduced
personnel
FTEs.
standpoint,
Yeah,
FTE.
yeah. And even, building expenses.
Mhm.
You know, we'd be jettisoning the middle school burden, so there'd be some big changes there.
So Zach, and I might miss you there for a second. You're talking about closing Washington, tearing down the middle school, closing down this building, and then building a new building, right?
Whatever that building is would be
And then-
dependent on all the,
And then still looking at the Pence, the new middle school.
still using Pence in some capacity as a middle school, yes.
Yep.
Yep.
Possibly just a 7th or 8th grade situation.
If we go pre-K 6.
Yep. And then trying to put a gymnasium as a part of the new school. That.
We would definitely still need to have the additional space.
Yep.
So from a project standpoint, I don't see it being cheaper to do that. It would be more the operational cost associated with closing another building.
Now, from your administration team, I think you mentioned that you shared this with them. What has their response been to that idea?
Yeah, we talked, I don't know, probably 2 or 3 weeks ago. Overall, pretty receptive. It hasn't gone anywhere else other than that, so this is the first time publicly that we've spoken about that option. But definitely, I was much, I don't know, what's the word? It was received much better than I thought it would be,
Yeah.
I guess.
Now I don't know if I think this is a good idea, but we've talked about possibly taking 7th and 8th grade into the high school if there was space for that. Is there space for that, and does that make sense?
Dee thought there was space.
What's your
I know Dee thought that, but
on your?
Yeah, I don't know. I'd have to
the,
check.
Like
Yeah.
9, 10, 11, 12. What's that total?
It's about 455 right now, isn't it? 453.
Yeah, really quick.
And then can you do it for like the next 3 years? Just like is it close?
461. Oh, hold on. 445 this year. 461 next year. $456 the following year. And 446 the year after that.
2029.
2029. 427. 2030, 424.
And eventually 320.
I mean, why don't we shut down the middle school, move 7 and 8 to the high school, and expand either Pence or Pence and Washington to absorb the other grades? There may be a little shuffling. Do we have capacity to do that? I mean, assuming we verify that we have capacity for 7 and 8 at the high school, then do we have capacity for 5 and 6?
Are you saying go to 2 buildings?
You're si-
No, she's saying
3 buildings, keep
yeah,
Washington.
keep Washington. So we
and-
would renovate
and Pence
those as
and-
opposed to a new project and then get rid of the middle school.
Because a renovation isn't gonna take us 2 years, maybe not, but maybe only a year and a half.
Yeah, it's hard to think about. I mean, my initial reaction was, yeah, let's put this on the ballot next fall. But then when you look at enrollment numbers, it's a little bit jarring. So kind of shifts how we have to think
the
about
enrollment
things.
numbers make it a really tough sales piece to get to
And
pass.
you're gonna see fewer and fewer people in the high school. And we talked about the culture at the high school, the mood, the emptiness. You know, fewer and fewer students doesn't sound like it's gonna light the place up.
So if you did look at a pre-K through 6th grade facility, how many kids would you be talking in that facility?
Yeah, so like if that was this year, it'd be 806 kids.
It's a lot.
Next
What about
year,
in 2029?
and then 2029, 709 kids.
What was the first number?
860 something, something?
806, I think. 806
806.
is what that would be as we sit today.
And you said that was pre-K 6.
Right.
Now the theory with that is that we're gonna be able to build that significantly cheaper than what the proposed middle school project was, right? Or no?
Not if we're gonna still have, you know, a good sized gym. I think it's gonna be similar to cost. I mean, Chris could speak to that for sure, but we're another year out for sure with all the costs. But we would be reducing from 4 attendance centers to 3, so that's where operationally there would be a significant cost savings over time.
I guess my question is if there's not much cost savings there, I'm just playing devil's advocate. Why would we do that then? I guess at that point, I mean, change that setup. I guess is my question, because we talked about how Washington. I mean, for the several years that I've been hearing, that's our best building.
As far as like structurally.
Structurally, yes. I realize the space is not great, but it's our best building. I think Pence is considered to be an excellent building, but just the overall classroom size, hall size, locker size, it's going to seem like a pretty condensed what we're used to for a middle school, you know. I'm just playing devil's advocate for a minute. I mean, I guess why would be my question, you know.
Yeah, the only why behind that really is financial. When you're gonna completely shut down a school, you're gonna save money on personnel, significant dollars with administration, with secretaries, with custodians, extra stops for buses. I mean, it's gonna be compounded. I haven't looked at any numbers or like tried to figure any of that out yet because I just wanted to have the discussion. But in my mind, that's really looking at it strictly through the financial lens. I mean, that's so much more as far as work that goes into talking with people, communicating things. And I don't know if it's the right decision. I mean, we're looking at things that we don't know are certain yet, right?
I'd throw out there too that if we did go for a new middle school bond and build a new middle school, I believe that we'd still be going down to 3 attendance centers eventually, because with these lowered numbers, we're going to be moving PK and 1 over to Pence pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think I'd be more inclined, you know, if we were planning how many sections, right, in the middle school, but if we're dropping down to just 4 sections, then we can have a whole nother grade in the same building at the middle school.
Absolutely.
So I would,
Exactly. So this
I
is.
think it makes more
if-
sense to build a middle school with what the kids' needs are in middle school. And what we don't have that right now for these kids in terms of a gym, and you know, it would be a better upgrade, I think, for our district than a new elementary school.
If I can jump in, I totally agree with that. If you're putting numbers to this, you know, a renovation of the middle school, I mean, we got $21 million available in SAVE funds plus some money in the SAVE category right now. We had projected a $15 million just to repair it, and then another $40 million to renovate it. Those project costs are going to eat up all the operational savings that we can see in my mind. And if we have a new building like this, it gives us the flexibility to close an attendance center in the future and not pour any more money into capital or into improvements and repairs. I can't see where the highest and best use of tax dollars. And we're on the other side, to me, we're going to have a general bond issue if we build a new elementary school, if we go into a renovation for the middle school. So if we're going to be facing a bond issue anyway, the highest and best use of those tax dollars is what we proposed. And I would like to see us go back on the ballot with this design, this project, because I think it's the best use of tax dollars, and it gives us the best operational flexibility in the future to get those operational costs. And I think that we can continue to make that case. I don't think we lost in such an overwhelming manner that it can't be overcome. And I think we should go back in November. I personally just cannot put any money into this obsolete building as a steward of taxpayer dollars. I just can't. So I'm in the camp of going to do the bond issue in November and taking it back to the public and making that case. As Megan said, it gives us a whole range of operational flexibility with the gyms, with the size, that if we do run into enrollment problems as projected, we can close a building and use this new building to a better use than we can trying to build a new elementary school and then closing Washington and doing all those things. That's my opinion.
So from a reconfiguration standpoint, we wouldn't have to be as specific maybe with 5th through 8th. It would be a new middle school, and we're going to design that or use what we have design-wise with some potential to make some tweaks. Is that kind of what you're thinking, Dave?
Yep.
Okay.
I think you'd have to redesign it in a way that, like, the 3 wings may not make sense. Like, what gives you the most flexibility to say we can host whatever grades we want in there and break it up in a way. If you do 3 wings, you are kind of limited to 1 or 2 per one, and then you have to mingle those depending on how you do it. So it may be a similar setup, just a more open idea plan of how can we reuse those areas. If the fluctuation goes, we can throw another grade in there somewhere without having to upset everybody and move them all around again to get to it.
So Mark, if I can just interject, I think we should keep the wings because it allows us the flexibility to put younger students in with older students and segregate them in a way that reduces the anxiety of the taxpayers and the parents. And I think it's actually more flexible with the wings to be able to move grades around than it is without them. I think we should just stay with the current design, maybe not be as specific as we had, just say that it gives us more flexibility for declining enrollment and keep it the way it is so that we can segregate grades if we need to.
Yeah, and I was saying get rid of the wings. I'm saying you may have to reconfigure those wings to be more flexible to hold either the same amount of grades in each wing or something along those lines, just so we don't have one that's like, this was 4th grade and now 4th grade needs 2 rooms. Now what do you do? So we may have to get a little more creative with that.
And when I talked to FEH at the conference, I just kind of had this discussion about being more flexible about grades and everything. And they said that would be a huge part of after you pass the bond, of looking at it and making sure that, we do make it flexible like that. Because if that's one of our top priorities, which I think it has to be, is being able to make it flexible for another grade to go in, then I think we can go to FEH and say, let's make sure this design is as flexible as possible. And they're kind of expecting that.
And the last thing I'll say is, as far as the discussion on what we're going to invest in the other buildings, we already have a 5-year capital plan that takes into consideration those things. So I think we stick with a 5-year capital plan. We stick with the current design with the flexibility after the bond issue passes to actually get in the actual design of the building using the professionals we have and the admin team. And use the flexibility of a new building to manage the enrollment that we're projecting. And I think that's, in the long run, that's going to be the cheapest and best use of our taxpayer dollars.
Evan, on the site, I just printed off where you were telling me we tell the square footage and the capacity. Is that capacity like per classroom size, or is that just an overall like square footage divided by a number? It gives you a capacity.
How does that work, Chris?
Do you know that?
What was the question?
So they set a building occupancy ratio for us based on square footage. How's that number calculated? Because that's where we get our numbers from.
Are you talking about the numbers that FEH was throwing out there about so many square foot per student? Is that what you're asking about?
I don't know. I guess we're required now to post
Oh,
this somewhere.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious, like, if we look at these numbers, by year 2029, we can fit in the like middle school and the high school, and get rid of everything. If these are actual, I mean, I know it's a matter of the high school has a lot of wasted space, so you can't fix the wasted space. But that's what I was just curious how that number was calculated. Is it just like square footage divided by so many students, and you get that even though it's not usable space, or is it doesn't take care of the auditorium or the gym or any of the stuff that's not really
So when I've done previous grants before and I'm tying it towards FEMA standards, it's 10 square foot per person you need for natural disaster purposes. So I'd be curious to take that number and divide it by 10 square feet and see how many the occupancy comes out at.
okay?
That's the only number that I have in my brain of
I
like,
don't think the numbers you have to post are related to building square footage, are they? I think they're more based on your classrooms and.
I have no idea.
Number of rooms, I think.
So there'll just have to be more work that we have to dig into to see what. I mean, before as we start talking about we're gonna move grade over, you're gonna have to figure out how many classrooms do we even have, and is it even possible?
So Evan, your scenario 2 was fixing up the middle school, I believe. Was that?
That was 2.
Yeah. Are there any silver bullets? Is there $5-10 million worth of stuff that we could do and it would lower our maintenance costs so much that it might make sense?
Of the current middle school.
Things to change in the design that would.
No, just the
current middle
school actual like repairs and renovations.
If we were to spend $5 or $10 million over the next couple of years to try to do something there, would that?
Is there anything that's like huge bang for the buck?
Well, I think you'd spend that much fixing the envelope, making it so it doesn't leak, gain very little on the inside other than better quality space, but.
So basically, we'd spend
That's a lot
$5
of
to $10
money.
million on making sure we don't have towels in the library sopping up water every time it rains.
I think you'd spend that. I mean, if you were gonna keep the middle school, I would definitely recommend getting an envelope consultant and somebody that's all they do is envelope performance and do some actual testing on it and see if you could fix it without redoing the whole exterior. But I think it would be close to that, I do.
I'll just say that scenario is my least favorite. Of the other two, I can probably be swayed, but that's definitely my least favorite, is putting any money into that building.
Do we have a number of how much money we actually spent on trying to fix the roof the last time around? I know no one was here, but is that number filed away somewhere?
Just for the roof?
Yeah.
Can you check?
I feel like we discussed it at one of the meetings.
The former facilities director, he gave me a jarring large number that I should probably text him and see what the exact dollar amount was, but it was millions that was poured into that building just in his tenure in 6 years. This was 2015 to 2020 probably.
I remember discussing that in one of our action meetings when we first started this bond round, when we were in the middle school library. Yeah, but yeah, it was millions.
I think the roof just keep getting replaced in little sections, but I think the roof problem is the leaks aren't necessarily in the roof. I think they're in the walls that are.
Well, in 2021, or maybe it was, whenever the derecho went through, they had crews here that were working on the roofs, but I was told that the roof was not done well by those crews primarily because they left mid-project to go do insurance work for the derecho,
Okay.
and it was never appropriately finished. Was one of the things that was told to me.
Along those lines, though, is like you still have to think like even if you do pass the next year, you're still 4 years out. So how do you keep this building going? I mean, I don't put any money into it, but what money do you have to keep it functional for 4 or 5 years?
You get the
to even
kids
get
out
the
of it.
kids
You
in
get the
there.
you get the kids out of it. You put them somewhere else during that interim. You put the kids in the high school, 7th and 8th graders enjoy the new gym, the new, you wanted those particular amenities, the auditorium and all that for the middle schoolers. Wouldn't they have that in the high school?
They wouldn't have practice time. It'd be tough.
Yeah, and
Everyone
if-
would share one gym.
You're saying even, I mean, so we passed the bond.
Mm-hmm.
You're saying we would want to, you're saying move the kids anyway before we,
Yeah.
okay.
Like fall of 2025, let the community know middle school is just not going to work anymore. We need to get the kids out of there. And even if the 5th and 6th graders need to go to some other facility like they did in 1970s, that's not a school, but it's a, I don't know, temporary school, then I can't imagine the bond would fail.
I know those
can't
temporary,
imagine
those
the
temporary
bond would be-
classrooms are pretty expensive too. The ones that you buy, I know Cardinal has a bunch of those.
Okay.
One thing
Well,
I
would you
will
like to put your money, I'm sorry, would you like to put your money in that or in the crappy middle school?
one thing I will say, we talk about not wanting to put money in the middle school, but I will say that a common thing I hear from people that voted no is they feel like that the school's purposefully not taking care of the middle school for a number of years in an attempt to get a new building.
That's not true.
It's not, but for years there's been a variety of things that have been neglected for a multitude of reasons. And obviously it's because we don't want to pour money into a bad building, but now we have a really, really, really bad building because of that strategy is what I'm trying to say. And
I
I'm
think
saying
that's
it's
all-
hard to sell a new building when that has taken place.
Yeah, that's
Because-
all. That's all in the past though. So like, there's nothing we can do to go back.
There's nothing
and
we can
say,
do, but-
we should have
but-
spent money 5 years ago. Like we got it. We have what we have now, and
Right.
like Dave and others people have hounded. Like,
But-
it's
but
just
it-
throwing our money away by putting money into.
But it's a pattern of behavior, and like I said, it's part of proving to the community that we have a different era of facility, a different facilities director, a different era, and we're doing better. Because I think a lot of people feel like, okay, they get this, we build a new building or whatever, and then they're gonna feel like, well, they're purposely not gonna take care of the next building that they want to redo in 20 years again. You see, and that's what I'm saying. That's what people are gonna say, that they feel like we're not good steward of tax dollars, and that's where the problem begins.
I think it's hard to say we neglected that building. We were just saying we poured millions into the roof 4 or 5 years ago.
But it wasn't done right, so it doesn't matter how much money we poured into it. It was still, I mean,
Yeah, but I mean, if the public is saying we're purposely not taking care of that building, we put millions into that building trying to fix that envelope. I mean, the fact that the workers screwed us, I mean, that may be true. I'm not sure. But I mean, we were trying.
yeah, I don't think they were held as accountable as they needed to be, but
So Chris, I'm curious, I know out of like the 33 bonds that were attempted, only like 13 of them passed. So I'm curious, do you think that that will affect pricing at all? Like, do you think that you'll
think
see
it'll
prices
affect
slow
pricing.
down at all, like as far as building costs, or no?
I don't think it'll affect, pricing in the grand scheme of things. I think there's a lot of other things, going on in the world that could have a lot bigger impact personally than that. Commodity
Because like
prices.
you guys will still be busy with like renovations or whatever, maybe not new facilities, but other projects.
Yeah, and there's just a lot of other construction besides K-12. There's obviously industrial and healthcare and
Sure.
different, commercial.
Gotcha.
So I think it won't have a big impact on it.
Okay.
What do you think the inflator's gonna be?
I'm sorry.
What do you think the new inflator's gonna be? So like currently we're sitting around $350 per square foot. By next November, what are we looking at?
Construction
3.5?
inflation, up until, COVID, we used 3 to 3.5%, just year in and year out, and it always worked out really well. And then in 3 years, we've jumped 50%. So going forward, I hope it's back to the 3.5%. But nobody can answer that.
So do we
Yeah.
wanna,
I'm just trying to think 2 years out by the time we break ground. What are we paying for a
I
2x4?
I mean, I agree with Dave. I think that, you know, we were very close on passing. I think that we have a good plan. I truly believe that that is the right decision for our community and that it is the highest and best use of our tax dollars. You know, we have a year of planning ahead of us regardless, and, you know, we can utilize that time to, you know, make things better, I think, and, you know, prioritize the things that, you know, our new administrators maybe feel we're missing or need to be changed. But I think to start all over at square one is a tough pill to swallow with how much time and energy and money we've invested into this project, and to be at 58%, you know, so close that I think it makes sense to try again.
What do we, I know it's brought up in Des Moines, but like, thoughts on FEH? Do we get anything back from those guys besides us saying we weren't, I don't wanna say happy, impressed, what the right word there is, but I mean, I know that's another big pill to swallow if you do change. It's could be a big revamp, or is it something that
How does that work? Do you have to start over at square one with a new design company if you choose to switch companies, or do you get to keep everything we've done?
We
With
paid for
them?
that work, so we could share what we've got with whomever it
Okay.
was. I would probably, first step for me would be to talk with a couple other architects from FEH to see if there's a better, you know, connection or whatever.
I think FEH is an overall firm. I think they do a fine job. I think that maybe there's been a couple personalities there that maybe haven't meshed well with maybe some of the community. So, I don't know. We've already changed firms once before the bulk, 5 of you were on this board, and when we made that transition, I felt like we had to, because the first bond I thought went especially bad. Part of that was because they changed personnel midstream, so there was some of the people finalizing that project right before the vote. I don't think 100% knew what they were doing because they got into the project so late. FEH, I think overall it's a great firm, and I think a lot of what we've seen from them is, failing is a typical part of bonds. What is the average time it takes? Is 3 times? Is that right?
depends on if you're increasing the tax rate.
Yes. Rural Iowa.
Yeah, well, southern rural is different than northern though, it really is. But yeah, some do take 3.
I don't know. I'm of the opinion. I think we need to look at FEH, but if you guys want, at first at least look at different people within FEH's company, and then everyone can look at there. I'm not saying we can't change firms, but I don't think we want to be that district that every time you fail a bond, you go to a new firm. And we did spend a lot of money on hiring FEH too, by the way. 60-some thousand, I think it was. So.
And that's all spent. It's not
We've
like
spent it,
if we
yeah.
go forward with them, it's not
We've
like a
spent
credit on anything, right?
Additional dollars, yeah.
Additional dollars beyond that, okay.
So if we spent that original 60-some thousand, do we have to spend that again, or is that?
No, we have all of the things that we need to move forward. There probably would be some additional costs if we had more forums or did any other type of sessions with people. And then once it passes, obviously there's going to be significant cost moving forward with them.
So are there things that we can move forward with now that keep us on track timeline wise without setting us back a whole nother year?
Yeah, there's the whole bond process. There's ballot languages, there's petitions that have to restart. We'd have to get back on the ballot. So there's a lot of
No,
signatures.
You mean to
in
get
terms
us
of the
ahead.
project,
Oh.
like,
Yeah, we'd have to spend money, I'm sure. I
I
don't know
think the
that,
only thing you could do would be to start doing full-blown design, but, that would be expensive. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing that.
And that's the part we've been putting off till after the bond. That's the next step.
We took,
There's
go ahead.
There's no way any of the operational savings flow back in any way to fund the project, is there? It's going back to general fund, operational savings.
All of that goes back into general fund, is that what you're saying?
It does.
Yes.
But not to be used to fund the project.
Y-
So the district would save money operationally long
Right.
term, but that doesn't decrease the tax obligation on the community. There's no way to do that, is there?
I mean, you could spend general fund dollars
Pay it off earlier,
on anything. It's just, do we want to
Would you want?
right? The whole idea
use
would be,
general fund?
We're in a
and
place to be able to do that.
Only if we reduce to 3 buildings instead of
well,
4.
so are we kind of coming to a consensus where this middle school building or middle grades building, if we put it on the ballot next year, it would be a little ambiguous in terms of what grades will ultimately be there in 2029. Maybe it's 3 through 8, maybe it's 4 through 8, maybe it's 2 through 7. Can we keep it sort of ambiguous for those years? And then with this kind of ongoing conversation of coming down to 3 attendance centers, if that is truly the trend over.
Was our language this year specific to what grades?
It was 4 through 8.
It wasn't on the ballot, but it was in all of our literature, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I think we could probably keep about the same ballot question.
We can't, we'd have to change the dollar amount, if
Just the
that changes it
dollar
out.
Does anyone, does
Did
that
it say
feel like
how
the
many grades, though?
consensus?
It just didn't say which grade, but it did
Just,
say how many? Or did it just say
Furnish
a new
and
middle
build
school?
and
I don't think
everything
so.
that goes with a new middle school.
Yeah, I'm cool with keeping the plan to move forward with it, going for the bond again and keeping the grades ambiguous.
And I will just advocate and push for a reduction to 3 attendance
And
centers.
it could
I
be
think you're-
Washington or it could be
Could be.
Pence.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Now, the parents would prefer that we close Washington so that they're not having to
Could
drive
be.
to 3 places.
Yeah, but it could be a PK2, 2.6 and a 7.12. Could be a PK2, 3.8, 9.12, PK. Yeah, there's a bunch of variants that we could look at.
Is there any extra room at Pence now? They're full.
There
Right.
will be,
They're-
right?
There will be, once we for sure move 4th grade out. So, you know, and then what we were talking about was moving another grade up and expanding preschool, so.
So we could potentially expand preschool
We still
next
could.
year. With 4th grade moving out, there'll be an extra classroom or 2 in Washington?
Not next year.
Not next year. Okay.
We're still, yeah, we're not planning to move 4th grade out of anywhere right now.
No, I guess I'm just thinking with the reduction down from,
We could expand there, but we have also talked about starting a big kindergarten
right,
class,
right,
so
right, okay.
as kind of a marketing tool.
That's good.
I'd like to know, has anybody else talked to people in the public about what their expectations of us moving forward? Because I've talked to about a half a dozen people and they all pretty much told me that we're gonna run the same thing next year and we'll pass it next year.
Same, but they were all people that were very supportive, so I haven't really talked to anybody that was against it. I don't know what those people are.
They're probably
Yeah,
not.
they're
gonna
hard to
change.
find. If you remember, I think I interviewed you when I first got on the board because I was looking for any no voters. I'm just throwing it out there. Anybody, no vote, talk to me. I want to know why you voted no. And it was, I didn't find many no voters that would admit that they voted no.
I mean, what I was relaying earlier, even the no vote thing, is that there are individuals, and usually these are people that have no best interest in the district. They just feel that we don't need a new building. And if
They're
that,
uninformed.
they're uninformed.
They don't
yes,
take the
yes.
time.
But they feel if that building isn't good enough for the kids, maybe that's the district's own doing. But they also don't realize that that building's been junk for 25 years and so on and so forth. And we don't want to keep pouring lost dollars over that or at that. But you know, I have had individuals tell me that it's already been voted down, so don't keep trying to run it until you just try to catch a time when people just don't show up at the ballot, which essentially that is a little bit of the strategy here. Is next year there won't be as many voters, and by some people's regard, if it was going to pass, I wanted to pass when everyone was there already voting, because then that meant that we really truly did have the majority of the community.
We did have the majority of the
did.
community, it's just the
Just
way that the
wasn't
law
enough.
is set up.
Yeah. which I was
Oh,
very
the
happy to
60.
see the delegate assembly, that's part of the
60%.
IASB lobbying, is trying to get it back to a simple majority.
In fact, because the majority voted yes, and such a large majority, I feel like we should put it
Yeah.
back on the ballot, because otherwise we're accepting what the minority, you know.
Yeah,
I know
I
that's
can't
the
tell you
law.
how many
Exactly.
people contacted me and thought it passed because they thought it was just a 50% thing, and I'm like, unfortunately not.
When I first looked at it, I thought it passed, and then I looked at the percentage.
Well, when I look at, when I look at the last two, yeah, there's only 11 states that do it that way, simple majority too. Yeah, when I look back at the last two school board elections, 21 and 23, it looks to me like if you take the total amount of votes that are on the ballots and divide by how many you could vote for, we get about an average of 2,500 people that are voting for the school bond stuff in these elections where the school board's also on it. I know there's like mayor and stuff like that. Maybe last time was bad because the mayor wasn't really too contested, right? Was that?
Right, that's why it was so low in
Yeah.
attendance, yeah.
But yeah, it seems like we get about 2,500 people to vote in those instead of the 7,000, I think, that voted in this one. We got 4,100 yes votes. If we get half of those to show up, we win. So we just need to re-engage the people that voted yes and just be like, show up, please show up.
The one thing I don't like about running it next year is that's going to coincide with the board election for 3 of our seats, you know, and the board is pretty much just going to get elected based on what people want the bond to pass or fail, you know. It's going to go right one on one with each other, and I mean, the board members that you probably get elected, it's probably going to be based solely on their view of the building.
And
You're
we've
saying
talked
like
about
there
that
could be
before.
candidates that are running for school board anti the bond vote?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and
Or
then
pro the bond vote?
and what I have found is generally speaking, if you have a board member that runs specifically on one issue, they're not going to be an overly effective board member because they're not going to care about anything other than the one issue.
Sure.
You know, when we ran, it was all about the masks and kind of a non-existent issue at this point. So
Yeah, I think historically when we could have special elections, we always tried to avoid the school board election, like the one where we got voted in, we had a special election in September before our election, because you don't want that to happen.
yeah,
And so it is a real concern, like, you know, you're turning that entire school board election into bonds, pretty much.
and then all of a sudden it fails, and you have 3 board members that were going to tie the building, and are they going to really have your core district's interests in mind? Probably not, because you know.
Sure.
Yeah,
Best
but
case
how
scenario.
would they get elected if nearly 60% of the people in the general wanted the bond to pass?
Yeah, best case scenario, I think we'd have just people that were pro bond running for it, and then that would be great. If you have some people running anti, that's going to really fire up the anti vote and have them show
Yeah,
up.
we can talk what ifs forever. I think
Yeah.
what I'm hearing is let's move forward with similar building project, middle school grade configurations to be determined, or let's get some more input around kind of the strategic planning 5 years down the road, and how that impacts our finances as well.
Yeah, and can we set some times to meet with some of the stakeholders again over the next few months?
Yep.
Yeah, I think it'd be key to bring them in so they can be our voice again. Because
Yeah.
the few people I did talk to did, I think is kind of sarcastically, bring up that we were pushing and if we didn't pass it, we were just going to go fix it. And so,
That's what we said we were gonna do.
yeah. So I think it's one of those where we just need to figure out
Oh.
a plan
Yeah.
to figure out, because it's like we walk them through a whole building that shows that it's falling to the ground, and then we're gonna say we're gonna go next year, and we'll just
We should
keep
have
going
said,
as needed in that building. We kind of need to have a little bit of a plan to show them, so we're just not saying again we're gonna abandon it for another year and see if it passes and then do it all over again. We need to show at least we're gonna fix a couple of those things. What that is the biggest bang for our buck to make it safer for the kids? We'd have to figure that out.
Yeah, and we could add that to our facilities plan because we hadn't done anything yet with the middle school. So.
I also think that for a couple of years now, it's made sense to move 8th grade to high school, but we keep pushing it back just because we don't want to make people mad, because that's
that'll get their
inevitably-
attention though,
That's inevitably going to make some people mad though, and they're going to vote against the bond because of that.
Against
Is
the
is
bond?
the theory, yes. Just like, we get emails about 4th grade's going to be in this building, I'm voting against it,
Oh, I see what you're
I
saying.
think we have to move slowly
Yeah.
through the process.
slowly with
With
transparent
intention,
communication and intentionality behind it all, yeah.
All right. Any last thoughts? All right. I think that's it. We just meeting adjourned at 8:11 p.m.